Hi, and welcome to the first of 3 episodes of Family Matters. We are beginning an exploration into God's design for the family. And in this first episode, our focus is on the role of the man, the husband. In the next episode, we'll focus on the role of a woman. And in our last and third episode, we'll focus on the role of children, as God intended by design. In our world today, the role of a man, and later that of a husband, for those who choose to marry, is often misunderstood or distorted. Some reduce it to domination, while others dismiss it as irrelevant. But Scripture presents a much richer, deeper, and more beautiful picture. Today, we will explore the husband's role as it flows from God's design. This is not a conclusive discussion, but the foundation upon which further discussions can take place. Let's begin at the beginning. The book of Genesis, the book of the beginnings. The scriptures tell us that of all mankind, the male was created first. He was formed from the dust, that is, the physical frame of a male was developed and designed and brought out of the dust. And he became a living soul when God breathed into him his life-giving breath of his spirit. Now, this is the miracle of life. Man became a living soul, a living being, when the frame molded from the earth, which was his body or is his body, and God's breath, which is his spirit, came together. Without God's breath in us, we are only dust that returns to the ground. It is his spirit that gives us life, and this union of body and spirit makes us living souls. That is why it is very important for a man, to still return this unity with God's spirit, for him to understand fully their real identity. But let's further continue with our discussion. After the male was created, God gave him responsibility to work and to guard the earth, starting from the garden. Notice this. Before there was marriage, before there was children, there was responsibility. The mature man was charged with tending the garden and managing God's creation. His work, starting from the garden, was to expand through the earth, and he was supposed to be the steward of the earth. But God also said it is not good for the male to be alone. The male needed a partner who would complement him, complete him, and help successfully fulfill their God-given responsibility, which is to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the air and over every living creature that moves upon the earth. So God created a female from the male's side, not from his head to rule over him, nor from his feet to be trampled upon, but out of his side to walk with him, sharing in this same calling. Adam called her woman because she was taken out of himself. So here we see something amazing. This is God's design. Both male and female carry the same living breath of God. Yet physically, the man's structure allows him to produce and supply seed, while the woman's structure allows her to receive and nurture the seed. If fertilized, this seed becomes a living soul within her womb, another miracle of life, which is then further nurtured even beyond birth by the mother. In this way, the woman ensures the continuity of mankind and of life itself. So you see, both are equal in worth, both necessary, but they have different roles. And only together do they fulfill God's mandate, which is to be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over every living thing. Paul expands on God's design for the husband in the New Testament, and he does so with balance, clarity, and depth. We see this in 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 3. Paul establishes the order, the divine order. He said the head of every man is Christ. The head of woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Headship here is about responsibility and divine order, not superiority. Just as Christ submits to the Father, yet remains equal with him, so in marriage, man and woman are equal in value, but distinct in role. Paul continues in verses 8 to 9, and he says, man is not from woman, but woman from man. Nor was man created for the woman, but woman for the man. Paul here is recollecting Genesis and recalls Genesis, where man was formed first and woman created as a helper suitable for him. Yet Paul balances this in verses 11 to 12 and says, nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor man of woman. For as woman came from man, so man also comes through woman. He's referring here to, of course, every man being born through a woman. And all things are from God, he concludes. This means there is no room for pride or domination. In marriage and family, the husband carries the responsibility as head, but he is never independent of his wife. They are interdependent, bound together in God's design, and together they reflect his image. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 22 and 28, Paul turns specifically to the relationship between husband and wife. And he writes, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Notice the model here. It's Christ's love. Paul explains why Christ gave himself, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle, but holy and blameless. So this sets the standard for husbands. A husband must love his wife as Christ loved the church, sacrificially, selflessly, and with the goal of helping her flourish spiritually, emotionally, and physically. A husband's words should respect, honor, cherish, and build his wife up, just as Christ uses the word to nurture his bride. Paul makes this point even more personal. He says husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, he says, because husband and wife are one flesh. No man ever hates his own body, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church. For we are members of his body, he says, of his flesh and of his bones. Finally, Paul roots his teaching in Genesis. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. Have you ever wondered why the man should leave his father and mother? Well, it is so that he can be fully dedicated to caring, loving, and building his wife and presenting her to himself so that she can fulfill her role as a wife with joy.